What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the show. My guest today is a shining example of not only can things improve with age, but you can overcome any obstacle if you put your mind to it. Dan survived open heart surgery where he actually had to be revived several times on the table. And he comes all the way back to achieve national ranking status as a master's track athlete and even receiving All-American honors. Now, if that doesn't inspire you, I don't know what else will. He's got an amazing story, and I'm going to let him tell it to you. So please welcome Dan Williams. Welcome to the Jacked Up podcast. It's awesome to have you on the show today.
Hey, John, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for the invite.
Oh, thank you for being here. I read your story and took it like a deep dive into your bio and whatnot, and you have a story that's truly inspirational on multiple levels. The things that you've been able to do at your age and some of the obstacles that you've overcome are just absolutely amazing, and I know my audience is going to get a lot of inspiration out of it. So with that being said, why don't you take us back, tell us a little bit about yourself, and tell us about that moment that happened and the obstacle that was created that you actually overcame to where, New Heart for Life, the New Heart for Life story came about.
Yeah, John, well, I know our goals are aligned, and if only one person, maybe more, can be inspired and perhaps shift their life and their life habits and, learn from the pitfalls that I went through and some of the lessons I learned, and this endeavor and your podcast will make it all worthwhile. I'm not that far from you. We're right next door to each other. You're in West Virginia. I'm in Virginia.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So, in fact, the New Hartford story started in West Virginia. It started in Martinsburg,
Really?
West Virginia, at the VA hospital.
Okay.
And I went into the VA hospital, which is my primary care facility. And I could take DC because I'm kind of right in the middle between Martinsburg Hospital and VA Hospital in DC. But
Right.
if anybody has had the privilege of taking that ride towards your neck of the woods, it's kind of, I don't really look forward to going to the hospital at any time. Who does? But it's beautiful country and it's a beautiful ride. And that's my primary care facility. And that's where I went
Right.
when I was diagnosed with I had walk-in pneumonia at the time, and I was still working, but I was very sluggish. And it was a Friday night. The heart attacks come in different variations. Some of them, they talk about an elephant on the chest.
Yeah.
It wasn't quite an elephant, but I woke up on a Friday night and I was just, something was very, very different. And I thought it might be connected with the pneumonia. I did not connect it with a heart attack per se, because I'd been cleared on that level about a week and a half earlier. But nonetheless, I made the trek out to Martinsburg, West Virginia, and the the intake doctor said, well, you may have pneumonia, and that might complicate things, but you just had a heart attack. And that was an awakening because I wasn't expecting that to be the answer. And then I actually was out in the ICU unit in West Virginia at that time for a week. There was a backlog in the DC VA hospital.
Right.
And so I was in West Virginia. I love your state, but I'd rather not spent that week in that ICU unit. And they finally took me into to DC. And so it started in West Virginia, and I went into the DC hospital for what they call a stent procedure. There's nothing normal when you talk about the heart and operations, but I was an inpatient. Excuse me. I went in thinking I was going to be an outpatient. In other words, that it was going to be one of those in and outs, and bada bing, bada boom. And yeah, it was bada bing, bada heart attack. I had multiple heart attacks on the table. And the cardiologist at the time called up to the head heart surgeon and said, it was one of those, Houston, we have a problem.
Right.
We have problems, multiple, because pneumonia, blood thinners that I was on from being at the VA facility in West Virginia,
Yeah.
and pneumonia. And they ballooned me up that night. And then the next morning, this has all been told to me. I went through a 9-hour procedure. They lost me twice on the table. They couldn't stop the bleeding. I was in a 4-day induced coma. The only thing I
Wow.
remember is one of my daughters who was holding vigil one night.
Mm-hmm.
I could hear the words as clearly as we're talking today,
Mm-hmm.
and those words were, "Hey, Dad." And I later learned that she was holding my hand, and I did squeeze her hand, so I was coming out of the coma. The next
Mm-hmm.
morning, I awakened. I had my wrist tied to the bed rails,
Mm-hmm.
and I was absolutely frightened, intubated,
Oh
could
yeah.
not speak, was not prepared. I mean, never,
Mm-hmm.
just everything was just a nightmare. And then I had the story told to me what had happened a week earlier.
Right, right. It's a lot of people, um, because they've never experienced it. They just, it doesn't really ring true to them. But you talked about waking up and being intubated. Now, in my case, I was in a diabetic coma and I wasn't intubated, but waking up 7 hours after going into that coma in the hospital when I went in the coma, I was at work. I was underneath a car working on a car, and
Wow.
I literally just went unconscious and went into a diabetic coma because my blood sugar was extremely high. So
Mhm.
I can only imagine what you were feeling at that moment when you finally came out and here you are, you're in the hospital and you've got all these things and stuff going on. Imagine that had to be quite frightening.
It was. And I remember this is actually this is I remember while maybe a couple of days after that they brought a patient into my room, and the
Mm-hmm.
doctor was there, and I don't know if I was even speaking at that time, but um,
Right.
I had learned that patient was being shown what was
Mm-hmm.
the situation and what was going to happen, preparing them for the situation that had surprised me. And, you just described with your coma, so they've tried to prepare him as best as possible.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, well, that's okay. Guess that's right. When people have heart attacks, they don't necessarily have to go through emergency open heart surgery. They actually plan them. Um, and I learned later that that veteran did not make it, and I
Mm.
think of him. I think of him often. But yes,
Right.
it was a very scary situation and surreal all the way around.
Mm-hmm.
I remember I have 4 beautiful daughters, and one of them, I could not obviously could not speak, and but I did have some things I wanted to express. So
Right.
she came up with this innovative game of, she put in the alphabet, right?
Mm-hmm.
On 26 lines. I don't know,
Right.
um, maybe 7 or 8 lines of the A, B, C, D, and then I would point to I would first point to a row, and she would,
Okay.
of the letter that I wanted her to select. And,
Mm-hmm.
talking about appreciation and just, how blessed we are just to be having this conversation and all the things we take for granted.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember it took about 20 minutes just to get through one expression that I wanted to convey.
Yeah.
And it's not an experience that I want to repeat. And I have plenty of empathy for anybody that would have to go through that in any scenario.
Indeed. Indeed. So now let me ask you. All right. So you went to the hospital because you were obviously feeling pressure and whatnot in your chest. They were talking about pneumonia and other things. Other than at that point in time when you first went to the hospital, what was your health and fitness like?
Yeah. So hindsight's always, 2020, and or another way to
Absolutely.
say it is
Hmm.
brighter through obscurity is another phrase, right?
Yeah,
Hey,
exactly.
now I can, this crystal clear, I mean, who couldn't have predicted
Hmm.
this?
Right.
I had the perfect scenario. That year, I lost my father. I was under a tremendous amount of stress.
Okay.
He died, as after a very, very full life at the age of 91 with children and
Hmm.
grandchildren around his bed. But anytime there's a death in the family, there's trauma that is there,
Sure.
but you're not really that sensitive to it. So there was that. There was I was in a sales leadership position,
Hmm.
so say no more, right?
Oh
Um,
yeah.
quotas and pressure and personalities, and so it was a very tense year. A couple other things cropped into that. My eating habits were it's like a it's like a um, there were no eating habits. There were no healthy eating habits. I
Right.
had run previously. I'd run 3 marathons
Okay.
back in my late 20s, early 30s, but
Hmm.
I had fallen out of that healthy
Right.
routine. And
Hmm.
so as you teed up, um,
Hmm.
going in, and then part of heart attacks are hereditary. Part of them is stress. Part of them is diet, and nutrition.
Yep.
So I had a perfect storm.
Hmm. Yeah. So you had like there was probably like family history of heart issues and stuff like that. You weren't eating well. And it's as far as running marathons and whatnot when you were younger and then getting out of it, that's a pretty common thing. A lot of
Hmm,
times people find that their health deteriorates as they get older, and it's because they start to abandon some of those things that they used to do
hmm,
when they were a little younger that kept them healthy.
hmm,
So I, everything that you're telling me, it's like you're talking about a perfect storm, and I can see it. I can see all the pieces of the puzzle laid out, and it makes total
hmm.
sense to me. So you have this incident. You basically wind up having to have open heart surgery. Now they originally wanted to put a stent in. What did they wind up doing when it was all said and done? What was the total procedure that you had done to your heart?
Yeah. So they actually they tried while I was having these heart attacks on the table.
Mm-hmm.
And medically, I can't explain what all triggered everything, but
Right.
the next day they cracked me open, cracked my chest open, and it was open heart surgery to
Right.
the point where I mean I've seen some. I don't know. I have a very weak stomach when it comes to medical issues.
Yeah.
My father was in the medical service corps. I don't really like hospitals or um,
Uh-huh.
but I did take a look at some procedures, and the open heart surgery procedures. They literally put your heart on the side, and
Oh
they
yeah.
took a vein out of my. This was an interesting aspect of the story that I've never shared. It's now all
Mm-hmm.
coming back.
Right.
But they had to take a vein out of my left leg, and then they used that as the bypass. So it was triple bypass
Okay.
surgery,
Right.
and they used my vein for my leg. And I've got um, I've got the tattoo of that of that. If I ever forget about it, really there, and
Uh-huh.
that was actually very painful in the recovery process. But trying just to walk with those nerves all
Oh,
frayed.
I'm sure. I'm sure. I'm sure. Okay. So they basically did bypass surgery. And how important, because I know we're going to talk here in a bit about how you got back involved in track and track type sports. And because of that, I'm very very curious. What was the recovery like after that was all done? How much did physical exercise play into that, or was it pretty much just like your standard physical therapy and things of that nature?
Yeah, so I was the walking wounded, and it's hard to put into words, but outwardly,
Mm-hmm.
I mean I lost it was a very accelerated weight loss program. I
Yep.
wouldn't recommend, but I lost about 20 pounds, so
Mm-hmm.
I was very frail,
Mm-hmm.
and it was a it, it's really difficult to say exactly, John, how it felt, but the insides of my body were I on the although on the outside at this time I was 62, 63 years old.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I felt like I was about 150. I just, it just took about 9 months for me to even feel whole inside.
Right.
And I did force myself to, to work earlier than I should have per doctor
Mm-hmm.
orders, and force myself back into a regular routine. Because when you're in any kind of a situation like that, at least for my own personal experience, I mean, the
Mm-hmm.
last thing there's so much going on with medicine and whatnot that if you're alone,
Mm-hmm.
you are stuck in a situation having to do the worst thing possible, and that is you're thinking about yourself and you're thinking about what hurt you.
Right.
So the workplace
Mm-hmm.
did help the transition. But the asterisk to the story, and then a real new heart for life message that I believe I am here to convey, and why I am in extra innings, is that you would have thought that what I just shared would have been enough for anybody to come to a realization of that was a bottom, and I need to change my habits. I need to
Right.
change my lifestyle.
Mm-hmm.
But through the initial recovery phase, once I got out of that, which is about 6 to 7, 8, 9 months, seeing
Mm-hmm.
the doctor on a regular basis and all that jazz, I
Right.
slipped back into my old habits.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't take doctor's orders. I
Right.
didn't exercise on a regular basis. My eating habits started to go back to, nothing that was vibed, and I wasn't feeling good about myself. Now, although I
Mm-hmm.
was out of the I was out of the initial danger. I
Right.
was now going right back into a very serious situation. And when you're not, the mind is kind of a devious creature. At least mine
Mm-hmm.
is when it comes to denial.
Yeah.
And but it also comes and it has an inner voice that starts talking to you. And literally one night at the dinner table, after I finished my meal, I pushed back from the table.
Mm-hmm.
I was feeling bloated. I, of course, had not been feeling good about myself. And a voice came to me as clearly as we're
Mm-hmm.
speaking here today. And that inner voice said, Danny, what are you doing? You've been
Mm-hmm.
so freely given this gift of life, and you're
Mm-hmm.
not going to get a second chance. It's
Right.
over, pal. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
that was the interest, the import of basically what I heard, and it was at that moment that I made a
Mm-hmm.
decision that I was going to reconnect with my passion of running. I was going to get fit, and that
Mm-hmm.
started my journey of new heart for life,
Mm-hmm.
not only literally but also figuratively. And it
Right.
was at that that was my epiphany, and that was my moment
Mm-hmm.
of decision.
Okay. That's awesome. So now, in your bio and some of the stuff that I've read on you, you use a term that it's like fitness is like life isn't a process; it's an event. Um, what? Why did you kind of coin that phrase, and why do you feel that way?
Gosh, hey, kudos for all your research. I've had many interviews. That's the first time anybody picked that one up. Um, I had actually started a company in the year 2000 after the dot-com bust.
Mm-hmm.
And by the way, now that I recall the story, I did have a stent procedure back in 2003. I had in this area, as you know, it was like the Silicon Valley of the East, and
Oh yeah.
um, I thought I was really successful and smart, but the truth is that I was in the right place at the right time with the right
Mm-hmm.
people, and I rode that .com bubble all the way up, and I imploded with it, and found
Mm-hmm.
myself on my head, without a job. My all my savings have been lost,
Yeah.
and this is a story about unemployment. Um,
Mm-hmm.
just like anything else, you have to experience to really appreciate and have empathy for people who have gone through that situation. And the net of
Right.
it was, John, that I started a company called the Networking Community.
Mm-hmm.
Couldn't find a job in the telecom space, so I did a lot of networking, and I wrote a book. I was writing chapters each week. They're really just a newsletter, and a publisher picked it up and
Mm-hmm.
put it together and asked me if I wanted to publish a book. And I didn't consider myself to be an author, but he was impressed enough with my being Irish, just telling tales of what happens when you're out there networking or what
Mm-hmm.
happens when you're not networking. And
Right.
the subtitle of that book, to get to your very poignant question, was Networking Like Life is a Process, Not an Event. Because
Mm-hmm.
networking to me was not glad handing, it was building relationships, following up, and helping
Right.
people out, being able
Mm-hmm.
to give what you could to help them out with the caveat with no expectations in return. So I had some very
Mm-hmm.
strong values, and that process was something
Right.
that I I designed. But the truth is that with I've inserted I've now put the word in fitness, like life is a
Mm-hmm.
process, not an event. And
Right.
you know, although a little different in terms of the principles, I've
Mm-hmm.
developed and I've now launched a YouTube channel
Mm-hmm.
with the clarity of looking back, 21 fitness principles
Mm-hmm.
that I at least experience that I think are somewhat universal. And so I'm
Right.
a big believer that um, it's the process, not the event, that is
Mm-hmm.
the most important part of the journey.
Right. Totally agree. It's just like this situation. Like a lot of the clients that I work with, um, they're very surprised when they first start working with me because they have this stereotype of what a what a nutritionist and what a coach is, and they find out very quickly that I'm not like, okay, um, you gave me your money, you gave me your stats. Here's your workout plan. Here's your diet plan. That's not me at all. I give them like 9 pages of homework across 2 intake forms. I have them give me all kinds of information, and it's stuff that they don't think that I would want to know. I want to know about what they consider their stress level to be at their job. I want to know if their loved
Mm,
ones in their
mm,
life support their decision to try to get healthy, or if they're like, well, just because you're on a diet doesn't mean I'm going to stop buying Twinkies. um,
mm,
all these things come into play because when I work with someone, I deal a whole lot more with their mindset than I do with just here's what you're going to eat and here's what you're going to do in the gym. Okay. Because all these things are connected. I talk about this so much on this podcast. The mind is directly connected to everything that happens in your body, and we need to make sure that if you're someone who's suffering from obesity, for example, how did you get obese? Are you a stress eater? Are you one of those people that when you're depressed you eat? What are the things that are causing your disordered eating habits? And those are the things that we need to change. And
mm,
that goes
mm.
exactly, it's not, this is not to liken it to your saying it's a process, not an event. When I work with people, it's about creating sustainable lifestyle change rather than just handing you a band-aid and say, here, put this on your boo-boo. You know what I mean?
Well, what I just heard you say is that I'm thinking to myself, John, where were you back in? I should have been not over at Martinsburg, West Virginia Hospital. I should have been visiting you during that time, or
Mm-hmm.
I could have avoided myself a lot of trauma because I needed somebody like you to be a sounding board because
Mm-hmm.
I was on that gerbil wheel, as so many people are, and denial or whatever it might be, or thinking that our minds are stronger than our bodies at times
Mm-hmm.
in terms of, oh, I can handle this. Actually, let me retract that. Our ego is what gets in the way, or at least speaking for myself, my ego and my pride of thinking, oh, I can handle this. Where having somebody like yourself, if I had sat back and described to you where I was at,
Mm-hmm.
you would have nailed it, because we are all too close to it ourselves. And I could have been a great example of somebody that you could have coached. And I admire your process and your dedication to really understanding beyond the surface of the symptoms
Mm-hmm.
what is really going on, because that's
Yep.
the root cause of our trauma.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. A good friend of mine did an episode. I think he was like the third person I had on this podcast when I started that this year. His name is Mike Gorman. They call him Gormy. This guy lost over 300 pounds, not once, but twice. Okay. He lost
Mm,
it all. He lost it all. Um, and because he didn't change his mindset, he gained it all back. The second
hmm
time around, he really buckled down on his diet, but the biggest thing that helped him lose it all again was that change in mindset. And that allowed him to lose all that weight all over again. Not only that, he's actually keeping it off. He's moved into a coaching role now where he actually coaches people on a ketogenic protocol how to lose weight.
mm,
It's
mm.
truly amazing what people can do when they realize that their troubles, their problems aren't always black and white. Sometimes it's just up here. Sometimes it's
Right.
just how
Right.
you're thinking about what it is that's going on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so true. It's the underlying, that example that you just shared
Mm-hmm.
of of the gentleman that lost 300 pounds twice. And the second time, uh, I'm, just kind of projecting out how the scenario might have played out. Um, when it's not whether, whether it be losing weight, whether it be recovering from the situation that you had with
Mm-hmm.
diabetes.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think the reality is that it's not easy. It is a slug. It's tough, and the we and I talk about this in one of my principles of resistance. And they're one
Mm-hmm.
word principles of fitness like life as a process, not an event. And on the
Right.
resistance principle, our mind wants us to stay in our comfort zones.
Mm-hmm.
And that's naturally, where we are, the fear of the unknown.
Yeah.
So for that type of an evolution of the story you just shared, certainly the New Heart for Life story, your
Mm-hmm.
story, and fill in the blanks, that we move from our comfort zone. And this
Mm-hmm.
is where people like yourself are really necessary to point out, a different way of thinking, a different way of undercovering really some of the underlying reasons. Then
Mm-hmm.
we move into the fear zone, because
Yeah.
the unknown is fearful, and
Sure.
fear is an innate emotion, and
Mm-hmm.
it's there for good reason, right?
Right.
I mean, it's there to protect us.
Mm-hmm.
We sometimes retract from it, but once we get through the fear zone and out of that space that we are really comfortable with,
Mm-hmm.
then we go into a learning zone. And I mean, I can go through my track, you know, the entire track process that I went through in terms of becoming nationally recognized, and
Mm-hmm.
coming back, and the New Heart for Life story with my track team and teammates.
Mm-hmm.
I learned a lot of lessons, and I say there's no failure, only feedback.
Mm-hmm.
And in that learning a lesson zone, we start to learn, hey, okay, what happened the first time when that weight was regained? What did I do differently? What were the triggers? You start to be intentional in thinking consciously about those issues. And
Mm-hmm.
then the growth zone is when you really start to appreciate the benefits of health and fitness. And
Mm-hmm.
so there is a underlying process. It's not, as you mentioned, just binary. A lot of
Right.
it is, got to be thought through.
Mm-hmm.
And certainly we're not all experts. Very rarely do we find somebody like yourself that really can
Right.
can look at it and look at the whole picture. So I talk about resistance. And on that one point that I'll just close in, because it's really,
Mm-hmm.
really helped me with track,
Mm-hmm.
is when and again, for anyone listening, just forget about my master's track accomplishments and my journey. Just put in my story in whatever you're going through. It could be a divorce. It
Mm-hmm.
could be the death of a loved one. It could
Right.
be COVID right now is really creating and oh my goodness. I mean, I mean, this time that we're talking is just there's so many so much out there that we're battling against. But the
Mm-hmm.
resistance in the mind wants us to hang around in that comfort zone. And so we really have to trick the mind. Either we have to do it ourselves or somebody
Yep.
like yourself has to help us do that. And
Mm-hmm.
how you trick your mind is that you put together a challenge. I used to say, and I do this all the time, if I can tie up my shoes,
Mm-hmm.
that is that's not a threat to me
Right.
going out there running 200-meter intervals. And
Mm-hmm.
so the mind doesn't consider it very dangerous. So the committee kind of shut the committee up
Right. Right.
and say, hey, we're going to get ready to do something here, but don't worry about it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just tying up my shoes, you know. It's like
Yep.
don't just go back to sleep. And
Mm-hmm.
then once we start that momentum and that motion,
Mm-hmm.
then all of a sudden, I've never returned from a track practice competition where I said, hey, that wasn't a great idea. I've always been proud of myself and felt better for it. So
Right.
to your philosophy, there is a process and it's not intuitive. It has
Mm-hmm.
to be shared and learned, and hopefully not the hard way as I went through my through my process.
Yeah, exactly. Unfortunately, a lot of times as human beings, we have to like slam into a brick wall at 100 miles an hour before we're like, oh, okay, what I'm doing is wrong. I need to change gears.
I get it.
And it's
Okay, I
yeah,
got the
yeah, yeah,
message.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I got message received. I'm moving on.
Yeah.
But I find it really funny. It's like in your you were talking about those almost like triggers and stuff that people set up for themselves, like you were talking about tying your shoes and whatnot. Me personally, early on in my fitness journey, when I first started going to the gym and I first started lifting weights and I started working towards my eventual goal, hopefully within the next 2 years, of competing in a bodybuilding competition, even though I'm in my 50s. um I developed this trigger when I go to the gym. There's a certain song that I always listen
Hmm.
to
Mm.
on my way out of the locker room. And I'm telling you, I'm not lying to you a bit. I can have a day that is so bad that I really
Yep.
don't want to be at the gym and I really don't want to
Yep.
work out. But I get to the gym and I put my stuff in the locker and I put my earphones in and I hit that first song. And in the 3 minutes that song plays and the time that it takes me to walk from the locker room to the gym floor, I'm an animal. I'm an absolute animal. I'm ready to just tear stuff up. But this is what I'm talking about. It's about mindset. You can set yourself up. You can set up switches just like a light switch. That
Right.
if you condition yourself, okay, when this happens, when A happens, shit's getting real. It's on. We're going to do this now.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Right.
And that's what
Right.
I try to instill in the people that I'm working with. And they don't all have to be. A lot of the clients that I work with are middle-aged people. They're not worried about, they're not worried about beach bodies and stuff like that. They just want to be healthy.
Right. Yeah, I just want to feel good.
But they can incorporate things like that and set up those little triggers for themselves to where it's like, okay, it's go time. Let's go do this. So now let me add. Go ahead.
Let me just quick before you ask your question.
Sure.
Just my curiosity is piqued. What song is it that triggers and gets you in the mojo?
It's kind of strange. Well, let me preface this by saying my son tells me all the time, Dad, you're in your 50s. You should not like heavy metal music. But there is a song by a band called Disturbed, and the name of the song is The Animal. And the song begins about talking, and the lyrics are talking about how there's an animal inside that's just been lurking and you've been trying to fight it down and trying to fight it down, and there's no holding it back now. It's coming. and just the way that the lyrics and the music and everything comes together. I'm telling you, when I hit the gym floor, and it's kind of funny because I know a lot of people at the gym, and even though I know a lot of people, even though I know a lot of people at the gym, they're like, man, when you come out of the locker room, we don't want to talk to you. We don't want to come anywhere near you because you look like you're about ready to rip somebody's head off. But it's just a mindset that I put myself in when I go to do these things. And because of that, I go in the gym most days, and there's guys that are in their 20s and 30s that are standing around looking at me like, what's he on? What's he doing? Something's not right here. He's outworking us by leaps and miles. So, it's just the power of the mindset cannot be stressed enough. You can literally do anything you put your mind to if you put yourself in that mindset and believe in yourself.
Yep.
So now the question that I wanted to ask you about was,
by the way, I the Tiger is my cue, so we're kindred.
Hey, you know what? I am the Tiger. I am the Tiger has pushed more middle-aged and older men to do things. But you know what? To be quite honest, the band that did that song, Survivor, they're probably responsible for a lot of guys having those hold my beer moments and then going and doing something stupid because they've been listening to Eye of the Tiger and they're like, yeah, I could do that. Hold my beer. And then the next thing you know, they're in the emergency room with a broken leg or something. Okay. So now I want to ask you about the whole tracking thing and how you got to be and actually ranked, ranked in the USA and in the tops categories of a master track athlete. I want you to tell me, first of all, the specifics behind that. But more importantly, how did you put yourself in the mindset to get to that point? And what were some of the things that you did, physically to get yourself ready for something like that?
Gotcha. Once the decision is made, by the way, the fitness principle number one, day one, is decide. So once the decision was made and we went back to that moment at the table, then and keep in mind, I mean, this is good context in terms of people that may not have worked out or not, previously, been in any kind of, academic fitness program or sports. I had 3 marathons under my belt, and I had run track in school. So I did have that background. And the important part of that message is that even knowing all that I knew, my process was I walked for 5 minutes. And then I would walk for 10 minutes and I would get myself up to 20, which led to 30. And then I started to jog for 5, which led to 20, which led to 40. So it was baby steps. And it wasn't easy. I mean, I'm 26.2 miles. As I tell my friends, right now, I'm a sprinter. My 400 meters and 200 meters is my specialty. On a good day, I don't think I could drive 26.2 miles right now without a break. Just that, those days, that dog has already hunted. But the point is that I had that type of a background, and it still took baby steps for me to slowly get back into it. The next phase, John, was when you make a decision for fitness or to lose weight or to reduce your sugar intake, fill in the blank, the beauty of the universe is that the universe will then open up to you with situations and people that you meet that you never could imagine. And started then to be more aware and then up, either consciously or unconsciously. And I came across I'll be turning 71 this month, which I am couldn't wait to get to be 70 because I run in 4-5 year age group. So I gotta wait till I'm 70. I gotta wait till I'm 75 in order to move up. Although there'll be plenty of competition waiting for me. But what I did was I came across this Masters organization, and Masters has track as well as it does, a plethora of sports, pickleball, whatever, it's a new we could have a separate conversation on this, but there's a new paradigm shift in terms of what a 71-year-old person looks like and what they should be doing.
Absolutely.
And that's another message with New Heart for Life is that this is not your grandfather's, stereotype.
Mm-hmm.
My
Right.
daughters are past the point of worrying about me, and now I'm inspiring them, sometimes indirectly.
Yeah.
So I went out on my own in this journey, in this process. Once I found out about Masters Track athletics, and there was a Maryland Senior Olympics,
Mm-hmm.
and that was in August of 2016. Now,
Mm-hmm.
keep in mind, I walked out of that hospital in January 2013. Now it's
Wow.
August 2016. So it took me
Mm-hmm.
a while. And
Right.
of course, 2 or 3 of those years was, being in the danger zone of
Mm-hmm.
not doing anything.
Right.
But I did start to prepare myself and went out and competed in 100 meters and took the bronze medal. And I'm going to myself, hey, I got this. This is
Mm-hmm.
good. I have a natural speed, and I did work out on my own a bit. The next day was I signed up for the 400 meters,
Mm-hmm.
and the 400 meters is nothing to joke with.
Yeah.
It's not aerobic, it's anaerobic, and that horse jumps on your back around the 300
Mm-hmm.
meter point. And I hadn't trained for the 400 meters, but I'm a
Right.
16-year-old spirit sitting in a
Mm-hmm.
67-year-old body with
Right.
this ego bigger than
Mm-hmm.
life, going,
Yep.
I got this. And this is the
Mm-hmm.
lesson of, hopefully through my story and your story and others
Mm-hmm.
that, is um, I, I, I did not even make it around the first curve the next day. I
Mm-hmm.
was dehydrated. It was very hot, and but hey, it could have been. That's like, who cares? I wasn't in shape. I wouldn't even
Right.
be. And it was if a knife had been thrown into my calf.
Mm-hmm.
I can't call it a cramp. I don't know what it was, but and I didn't even make it. I couldn't even walk to the finish line.
Yeah.
And so that began my journey of I came across a coach,
Mm-hmm.
um, similar to you being a nutritionist coach and a health
Mm-hmm.
coach and a fitness coach. Um, I recognized that I can't do this alone and
Right.
I need some expert advice. And I was
Mm-hmm.
just very fortunate to come across a coach. I'm now on a track team. That coach is all about technique, all
Mm-hmm.
about, and he coaches the high school team, but he also
Right.
has taken on as his passion a master's group. So there's about 19, 20 of us master athletes, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
talking. I'm running with. I can compete nationally, and I've done very well, and I'm nationally ranked. But I
Mm-hmm.
literally, John, am running with national champions and world champions on this team. It's a very elite team. So
Wow.
I have been blessed to be on a team with the camaraderie, the family. Here comes another word in the 21 fitness principles. You ready?
Mm-hmm. What's that?
Accountability.
One of the biggest. One of the
Accountability.
biggest. Yep. Very, very early in my journey, I learned that you need to find a way to make yourself accountable. I don't care if it's with your family, with your friends. I actually read an article when I right after I joined a gym in 2013 for the first time. First time I'd walked into gym since I was 17 years old. Um, but I read this article and they were talking about how important accountability was, and in 2007, social media wasn't as big as it is now. I mean, you had MySpace and you did have Facebook and things like that, but that's what they were talking about. They said put yourself out there, get a social
Right.
media account and post. Say, look, this is where I am now. This is where I'm going, and I'm going to post every day and talk about the things that I do to get me there.
Yep.
And that's
Yep.
what put me in the mindset to where I decided that I wanted to make this my career because it became my obsession to help people. That's when I was like, okay, I've got to get into Facebook. I've got to get into Instagram and YouTube
Right.
and all these things, because that's the best way to help the most people.
Yeah. And, you know, it. uh, especially for people like yourself, you seem to me to be self-motivated. I'm self-motivated, but the truth
Mm-hmm.
is we're not as self-motivated as we, at least that I would give myself credit for. And I talk about this in the, it's a video. I do 2-minute videos on these fitness principles. And
Okay.
what I say in the accountability principle is, and this is, I probably need a psychologist to explain this to me, but I can tell you the
Mm-hmm.
symptoms. When we have cues, the music, and all that, that does help. That
Mm-hmm.
gets us out the door. But
Right.
in addition to the cues, there's another layer on top of that that at least gets me moving, and that is I would rather let myself down, or it would be
Mm-hmm.
easier to let myself down than it would be to let my coach and my teammates down.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah.
And just that thought of, oh my goodness, I got to practice. It starts at 6 o'clock. I got to get over to
Mm-hmm.
Alexandria. And those that don't know the DC area, at 5 o'clock at night, 6 o'clock at night, that is a hot mess, getting into
Oh
traffic.
yeah. A hot
Whereas,
mess doesn't even begin to explain that.
right. And so I'm going, do I really want to do this? But then I'm going, there's no choice. I mean, I'm accountable to my coach.
Mm-hmm.
They've invested time, and I'm sure your clients feel this way about you.
Mm-hmm.
That sure, there's an exchange of money for your services. That's a business model that
Right.
is keeps the world spinning.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm sure your clients, and I certainly feel this way about my coach and my teammates, it's a family, and they, as
Mm-hmm.
you indicated, they really care about my well-being. They
Mm-hmm.
care about my health. They care about that I'm
Yep.
stretching it too far. And
Mm-hmm.
to have that kind of a love and that kind of support, I don't want to let, as I wouldn't want to let my daughters down. I don't
Right.
want to let my coach and my teammates down. I mean, on a different level, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
And so
Absolutely.
accountability is something that, as a principle, now we
Mm-hmm.
have different ways of being accountable, but as a principle for those, just everybody's got individual situations that can make them accountable, but
Mm-hmm.
maybe it's just your wife or husband or your daughter or a good
Mm-hmm.
friend.
Yeah. It's like you'll hear this term a lot if you like follow, a lot of the online content and whatnot in the motivational space.
Mm,
And that term is finding your why, knowing what your why is. And that's exactly
right.
what you're talking about. I literally, one of the biggest things I stress to my clients is, why are you doing this? Why is it that this is so important to you? You need to find what that why is, and you need to hold on to that like you're the dude on the
Right.
Titanic movie and you're holding on to the board
Right.
trying to stay there with your woman.
Right.
Because if you don't, if you can lose sight of your why, then your why isn't going to help you stay accountable. I've literally
Hmm.
told people, look, if your kids are your why, if you want to stick around and you want to be healthy because you want to see your kids grow up and you want to see grandkids and all that type of stuff, then you need to put a picture of your kids on your mirror. So when you get up out of bed in the morning and when you're heading to the restroom, the first thing you see is your
There you
kids.
go.
You see your why. You know, pictures in your dashboard, in your gym locker, whatever your why is. It doesn't have to be your kids, it doesn't have to be your wife or your husband, it doesn't have to be any of that, but you have to have a why, and that
Right.
why needs to be your motivating factor throughout everything. You can feel like absolute dog crap and be like, nope, I don't feel like going to the gym today. Nope, I'm not eating my healthy lunch, I'm going to McDonald's. It doesn't
Hmm.
matter whatever it is. When you have those times where you're like, nope, your why is right there to go, hey dummy, no, you need to continue on the path. That will keep you
Right.
accountable for sure.
Right. Because the
Absolutely.
body, that why is important. So why is that why important? The why is important because we are, and especially as you age, but I can say at any level, um, we and in this day and age, I mean, giving away my age, there used to be a
Mhm.
saying, and my mother and father used to tell me, he says, "You have the life of Riley." just
Uh,
your audience will
You know
pick up,
what?
but it
I'm
was a
not as old
TV.
as you, but I've heard that before. I have heard that before. Yep.
And we do have the life of Riley. I mean,
Hmm.
we have so many comforts
Yeah.
of just that in order to do something vigorous. And I mean, when you look, I mean, this gets a little deep, but when you look back at humankind, it was a matter, the why was, if I don't hunt, I starve.
Yeah.
If
Hmm.
I don't build a house, I
Hmm.
freeze.
Yep.
So we have been through our DNA and through our just, survival of the fittest. We've been
Hmm.
conditioned over time, and we're like in the nano period of life where
Hmm.
we don't have to hunt for food.
No.
We complain because we have to wait for the delivery truck. Hey, that
Hmm.
guy was supposed to be here 10 minutes ago.
Yeah.
So our comfort zone is like, in this Uber mode. And
Hmm.
and so when we get into fitness and we get into going to the gym and we get into doing the things that need to make to get our bodies right, we're
Hmm.
in a unique time of human history
Yeah.
where we have to break out of that comfort zone in that mind, and those
Hmm.
cues and that music and that picture of the daughter have
Right.
all got to be little gadgets that we have to use to get the
Hmm.
mind out of this mode of, hey, I just want to chill.
Right. Exactly. It's like one of my favorite people on the planet, Tony Robbins. He often talks about the brain as being a 2 million-year-old computer. It is programmed to
Right. I've
do
heard
it is
Tony.
and it's
Yeah,
programmed to do
yeah,
one thing and one thing only: survive. As long as we're
right,
surviving, it does not give a shit how comfortably we're surviving, how healthily we're
right,
surviving. But as long as
right,
we're surviving, that's all it's concerned about. It's up to us to reprogram this computer and say, "Hey, there's more."
right,
I
right,
don't have to live a bare bones lifestyle where I'm just barely getting by and I'm not as healthy as I should be and I'm not as active as I should be, and because of these things I don't interact with my family and my friends like I should. So much of that stuff is connected to the way we think about these things. People can
right.
get comfortable in amazing hardship when you think about it. I mean, you look at people like the Inuits and whatnot in Alaska. They live a subsistence lifestyle. Exactly what you were just talking about. If they don't hunt, they don't eat.
Right,
If they don't gather firewood, they die because they freeze to death.
right,
These
right,
things, are necessities, and we need to make more things in our life today in the society that we live in the world we live in. We need to make more things necessities and less things an option. That's how I look at it.
great way to put it. We have to create our own adversity physically, emotionally, and mentally, because how ironic where we think we've got this like how we've got this cushion, but how ironic that it's almost, it's a curse and a kiss.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I mean, the curse is we do have all the luxuries, relative. Not everyone has the same ones, and there's certain people, a lot of people that are not as blessed or as fortunate and are in dire situations. But relative to previous generations, we do have to make a proactive, intentional. That's
Mm-hmm.
another fitness principle word: intentional, conscious effort
Mm-hmm.
to create a situation where our bodies and our minds are challenged because
Yeah.
they aren't challenged normally.
Mm-hmm. No, we our society's, our world today is way too comfortable. You
Yeah.
look at the increase in the last 15 years alone of childhood obesity and kids that
Oh,
have type 2 diabetes, kids that are being diagnosed in their, late teens, early 20s as already having heart disease and high cholesterol and stuff like that. When you look at
hmm
that type of stuff, It kind of makes me want to take the video games and outlaw them and make kids go outside and play and
Right.
things like that, because you can look back, like somebody, I forget where I heard this, but it was a very, very valid point. You go back, go online and look at the pictures of the people at Woodstock. How many obese people did you see? None. None of them were obese. None of them were obese.
Right.
They were low body fat. They might have been smoked up and drank up and mushrooms and everything else, but they were healthy. They're healthy.
They're eating berries and nuts.
Yeah, exactly. Berries and nuts, drinking beer, smoking weed, and they were healthy as horses. And you look at it's like, I think the obesity rate now in the United States alone is like almost 40%. That's insane. That's absolutely insane.
John, if we have time, there's a pivot from this. It's just a great conversation, and if we could, the pivot to this is, and I mentioned it earlier in our conversation, is about the concept of and the stereotype of what a 71-year-old person looks like. Mm-hmm. So we are, although we've now just, described and anecdotally, we're thinking about, the stories that we've talked about, but for the audience, in what I'm learning is that there's a book called Growing Bolder, Not Older. Mm-hmm. Or actually it's called, this is by Mark Middleton. It's called Growing.
Hang on. I'll put you on full screen here.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. So, I've got no affiliation to Mark. I did meet him out in New Mexico. It's called Growing Bolder. Defy the Cult of Youth, Live with Passion and Purpose, Mark Middleton. And I always want to give him credit because I met Mark out at the senior games in Albuquerque, New Mexico last June, where, by the way, there was a 103-year-old lady by the name of Julia Hurricane Hawkins, 103. Wow. Who ran the 100-meter dash, and she's just Google her. She's amazing. I had pleasure meeting her.
I've got to check that out for sure.
Yeah, Julia. Yeah, you'll find a lot of pictures of her. She's cute as a button too, big rosy cheeks. But Mark talks about Growing Bolder is his book, but it's Growing Bolder, Not Older. Mm-hmm. And what he describes is that there is a movement up front. There is a change in the shift of what you and I have been talking about. Right. Yes, it's coming slowly, but we're at the very forefront of it. And that shift is that Mark talks about that, he's got motion versus medicine. Mm-hmm. You choose, right? Motion versus the need for exercise, the need of doing the things that we can do as we get into our 60s or 50s and 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s, and like Julia, and over 100. And the fact that we can really change, just as, when I was growing up, you didn't wear seatbelts and people smoked on airplanes. And, looking back, 30, 40, 50 years from now, we are at the very forefront of being able to change what aging looks like. And although it sounds, one of the things that really struck me about Mark and his philosophy and the stories that he brings to bear on, here's a show and tell of why it's not just words. Right. He talks about the fact that, you are much more capable of doing what society has taught you to do. And that examples like, myself, coming out of with the New Heart for Life scenario, and people would say, well, how can you go from a heart attack and then be just track competition? Well, you can do that. You have to do it slowly in the process we
Right.
talked about.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the themes that I'll just close out in terms of my passion for Mark and his philosophy
Mm-hmm.
is that what you want to do is, and this is what I want to do, is you want to live a vigorous, fit lifestyle
Mm-hmm.
and then die fast.
Yeah. Yep.
Right? Because when you think about these retirement homes and just the medical system and the society and how it's all
Mm-hmm.
geared, I mean, this slow decline is not something that I'm personally looking to. So I want to live a
Mm-hmm.
vigorous, healthy lifestyle and
Yep.
die fast and not be a subject of a nursing home. And
Mm-hmm.
you can do that if indeed, part of it's, God, God, God's got His hand in all of our lives, but you do have a
Yes.
certain amount of control and ownership in terms of how you
Mm-hmm.
want to live out your life.
Absolutely. I often tell people they're like, because, I don't look like the normal 53-year-old guy when you see me. I've been fortunate in the fact that I learned enough early on in my journey that when I shifted gears from just trying to get over type 2 diabetes, and I was like, okay, I did that. Now I need another goal. And somebody suggested bodybuilding. I've been able since I started lifting in the gym and started training towards bodybuilding when I was 43 years old, and I'm 53 now. In 10 years, I've been able to put on 32 pounds of muscle.
Mm.
For somebody my age, that is not an easy feat.
Oh,
But and it's all done naturally. I'm not on any kind of testosterone replacement therapy or anything like that. It's just nutrition and exercise. But when people see me, if I were to shave the beard off, I look 40 or younger, easy.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah. But obviously with the beard, I'm walking around. I'm pretty close. I might be able to play Santa Claus without dyeing it this year. I'm not sure yet. But you're exactly right. But I tell people all the time, I want to live to be 100, but I only want to live to be 100 if I can still have the quality of life that I have
right,
today or something close to it. Because here's the thing, if my health declines to the point where I can't have the quality of life that I have today, I don't want to be here.
right,
I
right,
don't. Because there comes a time where if you're not taking care of yourself and you don't have that higher quality of life, you become a burden, in my view.
right,
I mean,
right.
it's just
Yeah,
there are people that don't feel that way, but because there are people that subscribe to the philosophy, well, you take care of the young when they're young, so the younger need to take care of you when you're older. And I get that, and there's nothing wrong with it. But me personally, my own philosophy, I don't want to be a burden on my wife. I don't want to be a burden on my kids or
right,
my grandkids. So as long as I can
right,
have the quality of life that I have now,
right.
I'm good. I'm good. I'll just keep on trucking. But other than that, no, it's just not
And,
me.
and that's another why. I mean, not emotionally,
Mm-hmm.
financially, and we're
Absolutely.
living long. We're living longer because medical science is keeping us alive longer, right?
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yep.
our misery is just prolongated, if you
Yes.
will. So the whole concept of growing bolder, not older, to be
Mm-hmm.
able to do things that are unconventional, but do them smartly through people
Mm-hmm.
like yourself, um,
Yep.
and live long, die fast.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's awesome. Live long, die fast. I think that might actually be the name of this podcast. I think that's what we're going to name this episode. Live long and die fast. I like it. I do. I like that because when you think about it, you and I, not tooting either one of our horns, but you and I are unique individuals in that you don't normally see people go through the things that we went through and be able to turn things around and put their life in the direction that we have. And that's why I do this podcast. That's why I come to my
Right,
office every day and I turn my camera on and I do live Facebook videos and I make YouTube videos and I work with my clients and all this stuff. It's because I don't want to toot my own horn, but I want to let my story inspire others. I don't want
right,
somebody to wake up in an emergency room after they've been in a diabetic coma for 7 hours and their wife and kids are standing there crying, and the doctor looks them dead in the eye and says, if you keep going the way you're going, you'll be dead in a year. I don't want anybody to have to go through that. I want them to learn from my mistakes. You know, another quote that Tony Robbins uses all the time is success leaves clues. And it does. You, my friend, are a success story. Being able to come back from what you've come back from and do the things that you have done and that you're continuing to do, you know, that's it. That's a success. People should follow you because you obviously know how to get shit done in the way I look at it. You know what I'm saying? I went from 405 pounds to my smallest weight before I went to put on muscle. My lowest weight was 229 pounds, and I had not been 229 pounds since I was 12 years old because I was always a big kid. But I was 229 pounds and at 10% body fat at 43 years old. So, you know, but that's why I do what I do. That's what this podcast is all about. And that's why I look for people like you to have on the show. So, all right, we need to wrap this thing up. But before I do, why don't you let everybody know where they can reach out and contact you if they want? Tell them about the name of your YouTube channel and stuff like that.
Okay. I will. And I like this, you know, you're the host of the show, but I'm jacked up just having this conversation. I am where is it? Jacked up, right?
Jacked up. Absolutely.
Jacked up. So newheartforlife.com, you know, is the domain site. And when you go there, there's a number of links. The most complex thing in life is to keep it simple. So there's a number of links there. There's the American Heart Association story on New Heart for Life, where the branding started. There'll be podcasts like yourself that will be out there for viewers. There is the 21 fitness principles, which will take you to the YouTube channel now. Okay. And those are there. And I'd love to have any feedback on any of those principles. Now going to be filming principle 15 later today after the show. And any feedback on that, and I'll do 21, and then I'll repurpose those. And when all else fails, just go to Google, put in Dan Williams, New Heart for Life, and you'll be taken in the direction of a lot of my social media sites and articles that have been written about me.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Dan, my friend, I sure am glad you took time out of your schedule to get together with me to do this. You know, I said it before, I'll say it again. You're an absolute inspiration. Keep on doing what you do. I know I'll be following, and hopefully a bunch of my audience will too.
Okay, brother. Be well.
Okay. Sit tight for 1 second. I'm going to wrap this up, and then I'll come back and we'll have some parting words. Guys, I don't know what to say about this episode. You know, I don't know what to say. Well, I forget what it was. Live well and die fast. I don't know. I'll have to go back and look at the video because I'm telling you that's going to be the title of this thing. But anyway, you know, as always, I'm always looking for people to bring you guys motivational and inspiring stories. Obviously, Dan Williams is one of those. So do me a favor, like this video, share it with every damn buddy you know. Somebody's going to get some inspiration from this. And the more you share it, the more that'll happen. While you're at it, subscribe to the channel, click the bell, make sure you hit the all button. Go up and hit my Patreon link. It's $5 a month. It helps to keep the lights on in this place. As you can see, I've got lights everywhere. Yeah, I mean, this was amazing. So we're going to wrap it up. Until I see you guys next time, you know my motto, playtime's over. It's time to go to work.